Hi, I'm Matty and welcome to another episode of the Archive Dive here at Beyond Retro. This week we're going to talk about the 1920s. It's really important to put things into context in terms of the 20s because past Victoriana, we are now into a new decade where people really wanted a change. They've been, kind of like almost like 50, 60 years of Victorian rule, and the shapes really hadn't changed very much. They were still very heavily structured, and I think people just really wanted a break. So in direct contrast to that, from all these really tight waist and huge hips, it just made sense that everything was just really floaty. So the 20s was the introduction of the drop waist. Now, this particular piece is really beautiful because it puts a lot of things into context. So, in 1922, Carter and Carnarvon were in Egypt and they discovered Tutankhamun's tomb. And across the world, that really had this incredible reverberation in terms of culture and fashion. And this dress in particular is a really great mirror of that. So you've got all these really beautiful kind of dark eastern velvets, this beautiful kind of suede here, this beadwork kind of reminiscent of the East, which at the time was from, there was this real exoticism in modern culture, and it really flowed through into fashion. We can see, obviously, there's zero waste in this. The construction of this is so simple, but it's in complete contrast to something like this Victorian one. Do you know what I mean? So look at the difference there. We're talking like huge differences. So it's great. So everybody wanted a little bit of a breather as we get into the 20s. And there was a real kind of like youth quake, the first real youth quake. There was a real party atmosphere in the 20s for the most part. Not between everyone, because there was still a lot of poor people, but in, for people who had a little bit of money, or a bit more affluent, there was a real sense of party, and a real sense of jubilance, and also a real uptake in kind of like youth and the way that the youth express themselves. You take example for the Bright Young Things, who were this amazing kind of socialites in London in the 20s, and they had this real party kind of attitude about them, and their parties were legendary, and it caught on, and people just wanted a real piece of that. You can see also in this piece, which is great, is the fact that in the Victorian era, we had all these really long things. So you can imagine how shocking this would have been. The length of this dress would have been genuinely shocking. With showing almost a knee for the first time in years and years. So there was it was quite counterculture really, in terms of what's going on from the previous few decades. There was a real boost in kind of leisure wear as well. Women especially had this kind of like newfound freedom to play sports in a relaxed way, which they hadn't been able to previously. You'll see pictures of Victorian women playing croquet on the lawn in enormously corseted dresses and huge crinolines. So it's great, and this is a really beautiful example of it. What's really lovely is the details in this. It's amazing that this silk has lasted so long. Really gorgeous. This really amazing blush colour. And again, what's really cool about this is the fact that it kind of indicates quite a lot of people have this misnomer that everybody in the 20s was dead skinny and really up and down, but that wasn't really the case. This is like not all 20s, as shapeless as it was. It wasn't always that flattering on people, but it was the fashion, and so we can see that this is quite a big size, but again, still quite shapeless and sackless. So it's still not particularly flattering, but the details within it were really stunning. So we've got this thing here, which is called faggoting. This is really beautiful. It's extremely hard to do, and these really gorgeous little pin tucks that we'll see more of in the 30s. It's gorgeous little pocket. Again, kind of like This is a 20s one, and it's really interesting actually when you look at this, that you can see how similar that is to a lot of 50s shapes, but we've got this dropped waist. So basically there was no waist in it, it was really waistless in contrast to the Victorian era, and just all this really beautiful chiffon, and it's just a real floatiness. You know, you can see the fabrics have come up, and the fabrics are a lot lighter, the colours are a lot more playful, and the shapes themselves and the fabrics are just so much lighter and more playful. One of the really great things is we haven't got a huge amount of 20s in our archive because quite a lot of it was made out of silks and chiffons, and it really, really deteriorates. And also, especially during the British, all the British stuff, it just didn't survive the war, which was really sad. So what we have got is really close to our hearts. But what was really amazing during the 20s was when we talk about party wear, like, you know, we talk about this ethos of frivolity that the 20s had, and a lot of those dresses really, really mirror this. So this is such an amazingly classic dress for the era. The beadwork on this is absolutely stunning. Each one of these beads is hand stitched. Each one of these rounds is a single thread, so if you pull one it all disappears. So they were really, really, really delicate, and this incredible sequin work. And what was great about it, they started doing this thing where they were cutting dresses on the bias. So I don't know whether anybody knows what the bias is, but the bias is where you cut, instead of cutting the fabric down, you cut it at an angle. We'll see more of it in the 30s, but it kind of started first here. So what it means is that it fits across the body a lot better, and it really hangs particularly well because it's kind of because the fabric's trying to constantly go around you rather than down. So it has this really beautiful silhouette. And in the 20s, what was cool was that the cut, because the shape pretty much was, well, quite shapeless, what they tried to do was it was all about the way that they used to cut material. So you can see how incredible. So for example, this is really straight up and down, but the details are really gorgeous. But in this dress, again, the actual overall shape of it is still straight up and down, but the details within it are really amazing. It's been gathered under here. It's got all these incredible insets, and amazingly, it still lies straight. So you can imagine, when I pull this out, you actually see how much fabric there is in that skirt. But the way that it's been cut, because it's been cut on the bias and the V's that they cut into it, it actually lies really straight. So it's actually a really clever way of cutting, and also really effective and beautiful. We've got a few more absolutely stunning 20s things, and this, oh bless, this is shattered, but the work on this dress is absolutely phenomenal. So every single one of these beads, every single one is hand done, and I can't even begin to think how many beads. And to inset all this amazing silk work as well. Again, this is kind of cut on the bias because you can see it starts to shut to the side. Every single one of these crystals is hand done. What's amazing about these crystals more than any other era is the fact that they're actually set from the back, and then they come around the front, and then they're actually claw set on. Whereas things like during the 50s and the 70s, they actually just shoved them straight through and put them in the back. So it's even more work, and this is just beautiful. And again, a really great example of it being cut in the bias. So there's so much, you can't even see that really. It's so cleverly done. But if I pull it out, you can see where they've put this incredible V just in the bottom to give it all that. There you go. So the way that they've actually cut it, they've cut it with phenomenal, loads and loads of fabric. I stitch it up and it's just going to fall really flat and straight. I can't. This probably would have cost probably as much as a house, I think, back in the day, because I can't imagine where that would have been produced and how long that would have taken to piece it. It's exciting. Another really great thing. Let's go to this one before I move on. Another really gorgeous one. But what's really great about this is that this is 20s. Again, straight up and down. There's not much once we get to this waist. It is a little bit waisted actually for 20s, but what's interesting is that it's still there's no shape here through the hips. It's still pretty shapeless. But what's really amazing is the length. So the length is actually really, really short, and it's got all that gorgeous zigzagging across the bottom. This fluting, and again, phenomenal beadwork in this gorgeous white silk. So really, because we kind of entered an era where shape wasn't as important as it was previously, all the beauty is all in the details. Really, the devil really is in the details of this era. What was really exciting, and really exciting for me, because I've got a bit of a magpie and a bit of a thing for lurex and metallics. The 20s was the first time really that we really saw metallics woven into fabrics. This is a really, really great example. This is called lame, and you'll see a lot of it coming through in the 80s. But this amazing kind of like bronze and gold mix is such a beautiful thing. And it's all, what's amazing about it is all on silk. So if you mess this up, really there's no room for error. But really great to see. And what's really exciting about the 20s was the pattern cutting. So when we look at the way this pattern's cut, we've got this amazing V here of the bust, kind of dropped waist here, and still it's got all these incredible panels in it to give it all this. There's a lot of fabric, but again the shape is still very up and down. But I really love this piece because it's a really great example of all that early metallics that came through the 30s. What's really interesting is that kind of we see that come through into 80s wear as well. So this is an 80s dress, heavily inspired. These are all the 80s poets dresses. You can tell that they're 80s because they're a lot longer. Because obviously you can see the difference between the lengths, hopefully. Yep, you can see. Not that bothered about the modesty anymore, so they can make it as long or as short as they like. But yeah, it's really interesting. So the 20s also had a really, really direct influence on the 60s. We kind of went through another generation of really fitted, form-fitted fashions up until the 60s. And then you can see, kind of like the playfulness of that came through again in the 60s. These really sweet little details. So that's everything that I think we've got. I hope you've enjoyed that. Thanks a lot.